Hey, how's it going? Today we are going to be taking notes over solving inequalities. So the first thing I need you to do is to fold your paper. You're going to take the top side, fold it down into the middle, crease it up top. Then same thing on the bottom, fold it up into the middle and crease it. Mine are on 2 pieces of paper because I haven't made the final copies yet. So yours is going to look like this, but 1 piece of paper instead of 2. On the front, there's a special note that I want to make sure everybody writes down. So on the front, in this space, we're going to write note. Whenever you multiply or divide, whenever we multiply or divide by a negative number, we're going to flip the inequality. Whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, flip the inequality. Some of you guys might remember this from 6th grade, but if not, that's totally fine. We're going to review with you today. So again, one more time, whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, flip the inequality. If you need to pause to write that down, go ahead. Otherwise, I'm going to flip open and get started. We're going to start with the top side. The top side, these are just one-step inequalities. One-step inequalities over here before we get into the multi-steps. So this top left corner is where we're going to start. We're going to do the exact same thing that we did to solve equations. We're going to start with drawing our river of love for our problem. And again, we're going to do the inverse operations to solve. So on this side, if I have x plus 9, what's the inverse? What's the opposite of that? Subtract 9 from both sides. Because remember, the river of love reminds us what we do to one side, we have to do to the other. So positive 9 minus 9, they cancel out. All I have left on the side is x, but it's not an equal sign anymore. Now we have an inequality. This inequality is less than. The small side first means less than, because we want the bigger number to be eaten by the alligator mouth. What's 15 minus 9? 6. So we get x is less than 6. Number 2, same thing. Starting out with our river of love. And again, we're doing inverse operations. Let me zoom in. So if we have x minus 3 is greater than or equal to, that's what the line underneath means. The line underneath means equal to negative 6. So again, we're doing inverse operations. What's the opposite operation of negative 3 or minus 3? Adding 3. So I want to add 3 to both sides. And we get x. Are we going to flip our sign? We're not flipping our sign yet. We have to multiply or divide by a negative number to flip the sign. So it's going to stay the same way. And then negative 6 plus 3. This has been tripping some people up. One way that you can help solve this problem is if you draw a picture of 6 negatives, and then I have 3 positives, a negative and a positive, they cancel out. A negative and a positive, they cancel out. A negative and a positive, they cancel out. So all I have left are 3 negatives. So my answer is going to be x is greater than or equal to negative 3. Number 3 and 4, these ones are different operations. On number 3, remember if they're side by side, if numbers are side by side, what operation is that? That's multiplication. This is multiplying. Multiply when side by side. My 3 and my x, they're side by side, so that means they're multiplying together. Go ahead and draw your river of love. And like we said, if they're side by side, that means multiplication. So what's the inverse? What's the opposite of multiplication? Divide by 3. Divide by 3. So multiplying, dividing by 3, they cancel. So all we have left is x is less than or equal to, what's negative 27 divided by 3? It's 9. Is it going to be a positive or negative 9? If you forgot, use this pyramid that I showed you in the last set of notes to help you remember if it's positive or negative. Or I've seen some kids that like to do the tic-tac-toe, where the diagonal is a bunch of positives, and then everything else is negative. So if I have a negative and a positive, I cover those up, my answer is going to be a negative 9. Or if we see a negative number divided by a positive number, our answer is going to be negative. We see that here. So either way you do it, that's fine. And don't forget, you can also use Desmos to check if you're not quite sure. And the last one, 4, x over 7 is less than negative 3. What operation is it if they're on top and bottom of each other? That's division. When they're on top and bottom, we divide. So what's the opposite of division? Multiplication. So we're going to have to multiply both sides by what number? 7. So I take this side times 7. They cancel. I've got x. I take negative 3 times 7. What's negative 3 times 7? Negative 21. Use your triangle or use your tic-tac-toe to help you figure out your answer. Something that's kind of different with inequalities. With inequalities, for example, if I look at this first number, for number 1, I see that my answer is x is less than 6. So that means any number that is less than 6 works for this answer. So if I said 5, is 5 less than 6? Yeah. If I said 0, is 0 less than 6? Yeah. So any number that is smaller than 6 you can put here and it would be correct. Could I put 6 in this spot? I cannot put 6 in that spot. Why? This sign says less than 6. So 6 is not less than 6. That wouldn't work in this situation. But if we come over to this problem, if I put x is equal to negative 3, is negative 3 greater than or equal to negative 3? Yeah, negative 3 equals negative 3. So that would work in this situation. If it has a line underneath like these two problems do, that means it's also okay if it's less or if it equals that number. Go ahead. I'm going to have you try 5 and 6 on your own. Go ahead and pause the video. I just want to make one more note. Don't forget, if you multiply or divide by a negative number, flip the inequality. And what I mean by flip the inequality is if it was facing this way, it's going to flip now and face this way. If it was facing this way, now it's going to flip and it's going to face this way. So go ahead, pause the video, Try solving these two problems on your own for me. Welcome back. On number 5, you should have divided both sides by a -8. Because, I'm sorry. Because we divided by a -8, we had to flip this sign. This sign was facing the left side, but since we flipped it because of our negative, now it's facing the right side. So it changed directions because we divided by a negative number. On number 6, we multiplied both sides by a -4. So that means my sign had to flip directions. It was facing the left, but we flipped, so now it's facing the right side. Again, whenever you multiply or divide by a negative number, flip the inequality. Slide on over to the side. We have 7 and 8. These problems are now two-step inequalities. We're going to solve them the exact same way as equations. We're still adding and subtracting first, and then multiplying or dividing using inverse operations. But now it's just we have to keep in mind the sign. We may have to flip it. So go ahead and start drawing with your river of love. I'll write the sides over here in case we forgot. So step 1, that's the river of love. Step 2, you're going to add or subtract. Step 3, multiply or divide. Remember, when you're doing step 2 or 3, those are inverse operations. Go ahead and pause the video to write those notes down real quick if you need to. Otherwise, I'm going to keep going. All right, so we got our step 1. We got our river of love going on. Now we need to either add or subtract. You guys remember which side we start on? We start on the side with the variable and the number without the variable. So I'm going to start with my 4x minus 7 on that side. I'm going to start with that -7, that -7 first. So what's the inverse of -7? Add 7. So I'm going to add 7 to both sides. -7 plus 7 cancels out. So all we have left is 4x. And that is greater than, what's 5 plus 7? 12. So now we have 4x is greater than 12. Now we need to either multiply or divide, again doing inverse, opposite operations. What does it mean when they're side by side? Remember, if they're side by side, that means that you're multiplying. So what's the opposite of this multiplication? Division. So I'm going to divide both sides by 4. Do we need to flip our sign? No, why not? That's right, that's not a -4, it's positive. If it's positive, it's going to face the same direction. So we're going to have x is greater than, what's 12 divided by 4? 3. X is greater than 3. Alrighty, let's slide and go to number 8. Same steps, don't get afraid by those negatives. Get that river of love going on. Timon and Pumbaa will be very proud of you. Very proud of you. In case you don't know, that's the warthog and the meerkat from The Lion King. I was told not to sing again, ever. So again, do we start on the side with or without the variable? We start on the side with the variable and the number without the variable. So the first thing I want to do is get rid of that 2. How am I going to get rid of that 2? Subtract 2 from both sides. Subtract 2 from both sides. So my 2's cancel, and I'm left with -2x is less than or equal to What's negative 18 minus 2? Think about your number line. If you start on negative 18 on the number line and you subtract 2, we're going to the left 2 more spaces because we're subtracting. So that's going to give us a negative 20. Again, you can use Desmos for this topic if you want to use Desmos. So now we have negative 2x is less than or equal to negative 20. So now what do I have to do to both sides? What operation is this again when they're side by side? That's multiplication. So the opposite is division. So I have to divide both sides by negative 2. What happens if I divide or multiply by a negative number? What happens if I multiply or divide by a negative number? My negatives tell me I gotta flip my sign. So that means instead of the big side facing the right, I need to switch. The big side needs to face the left now. So my 2's cancel. I'm gonna have x is greater than or equal to, what's negative 20 divided by 2? Negative 2. Positive or negative 10? Positive or negative 10? If I had negative and a negative, my answer should be positive. A negative and a negative, my answer should be positive. So we end up with x is greater than or equal to negative or positive 10. Excuse me. If you have questions, please see me or Mr. Snook. But if you are ready, go ahead and flip down the bottom flat. And there's 4 problems for you to try on your own. Please pause the video because I'm not going to go through and solve them step by step. Pause the video, solve the problems, and when you're done, check play or hit play so you can see how you did. Did you really finish those problems already? Or do you need to pause the video again and finish up? Alrighty, so on number 9, first thing I need to get rid of on both sides is that negative 36. So I'm going to add 36 to both sides. We get 14x is greater than 6 plus 36 is 42. Then I divide both sides by 14. So you should get x is greater than 3. Any number that's bigger than 3 works for x. Down to number 10, I need to add 6 to both sides. So I get negative 4x is less than 10. Then I need to divide both sides by negative 4. I'm dividing by a negative number. What happens if I multiply or divide by a negative number? I need to flip my sign around. So my sign was facing the right. Now it's going to flip and face the left. So I have x is greater than, this one was tricky. I was being kind of mean here. You got to turn this is going to be a fraction answer or decimal answer. So if I divide my numerator and my denominator by 2, I get 5 over 2 for x. So you can write x is greater than 5 halves, or you can write x is greater than 2.5, or you can write x is greater than 2 1/2. Any of those are acceptable answers. Any of those are acceptable answers. Most mathematicians are going to leave it as that improper fraction. You're going to see a lot more fractions when you get into algebra and upper levels of math. You're not going to see as many decimals, so get comfortable with those fractions. Number 11, we have 9x plus 1 is less than or equal to 10. I subtract 1 from both sides. 9x is less than or equal to 9. Then divide both sides by 9. x is less than or equal to 1. Last one, number 12. First thing I have to do, add 3 to both sides. Make sure you're doing those inverse operations. So we get negative 5x is greater than or equal to 50. Then we need to divide, here, both sides by negative 5, divide by negative 5. Why did I keep making that sound? You know what you gotta do. If you multiply or divide by a negative number, you need to flip the sign around. So my sign was facing the left. Now I need to flip my sign, it needs to face the right. So we get x is less than or equal to negative 10. If you have questions about any of those, please see me or Mr. Schnook so we can answer your questions. Go ahead and keep on working through your playlist.